should lullaby.
In 5 months, this show will turn 3 years old. It's honestly weird and scary that 2023 is 3 years old once we get into more months of this year. Not to mention the fact that this show came out months after The Owl House, and people really wanted to see this show as the next Owl House. And while I understand the critiques when it comes to people thinking that this show was too much for people to get into in comparison to The Owl House, honestly, the way I see it, that's the closest positivity that I've seen from people when it comes to getting into this show. And while I was one of those people who were convinced from those people, all I can say is that this show still having a cliffhanger nearly 2 years ago is difficult to look at the issues in this, because rewatching this first episode from beginning to end, this didn't age poorly. Some people may disagree, but this didn't age poorly. Even what people may think in the fact that this show, despite having less viewers, Disney Channel still cancelled it. Even if it may be executives of Disney themselves, but my point is that with this being the episode request that 13 McJunkmen requested me to review, all I can say is that I think that this episode's age after almost 3 years is supposed to be a showcase of what a different cartoon should be. But I'm going to address on how people's critiques of having this show being too complicated to follow later. Let's get into the plot. The beginning of the Friend showcases of New Year's Eve happening, with the new year coming, and when it comes to Hailey herself, she never accomplishes anything in her life. Honestly, I did forget about this episode's premise when it comes to New Year itself, since that Hailey never did anything exciting. So I guess this is a detail that people probably missed out, and while it may not change their opinions on this show being complicated, but for me personally, it did showcase that Hailey just isn't as special as the other characters from school. She meets her future self, who orders her to do everything on her list, otherwise the future will be turned into madness, which we've seen numerous of times later on in the series. So with her goal into doing everything on her list when it comes to kissing Scott, honestly, she is not prepared for that. She's willing to do anything on her list aside from kissing Scott, which will drag on until the finale of the show, which I did review. And when it comes to the county fair towards the second half of this episode, well, it does showcase that if Hailey is willing to make her relationship with Scott to work, she needs a lot of time. And in all honesty, when it comes to people critiquing that element being complicated, minus the shipping hate, I would agree on that, but since I watched the final episodes of this show, they really thought this through in order to give Scott character development. So all I can say is that when it comes to people critiquing of how complicated this show is when it comes to the main character doing multiple taxes when it comes to each episode, I'm gonna say this right now, it's somewhat relatable when it comes to people wanting to do so many things, despite the fact that nothing is getting in the way, specifically their futures. Is it difficult to follow? Yes, I will admit that it took time for me to follow on the details when it comes to reviewing these episodes upon recording, but the way I see Hailey being in this position, she isn't really a popular character. She is designed to not accomplish anything important, especially since that in the beginning of the episode, she refuses to do anything when it comes to jumping into a pool from a higher level, or basically doing anything exciting when it comes to school activities. Honestly, some people in school are like Hailey in that position. And when it comes to love, really, if you were this nervous on asking a friend out when it comes to romance that had nothing to do with a terrible future getting in your way, you will relate to Hailey 200%, with the other 100% on you being extremely nervous into doing something that you really want to do, but your body is telling you no because you're not ready for it yet. It just seems to me that the people critiquing how complicated this show is probably won't relate to Hailey on that level when it comes to the goals that she has to do here and now. So, if you think about it a little closely, like I do, it just makes me to believe that those people probably just don't want to do everything that is way more complicated to them. And for me personally, the premise of this show made me see that that type of plot can work if a character like Hailey can go against the odds. Kids like Hailey don't mature the same way as other characters do. And for me personally, maturity doesn't always run with every single kid. So just seeing Hailey being put in this position, it's probably a difficult task for her, but mainly in her own way of handling it on her own in comparison to other people who would have done it a little bit more better than Hailey if they can catch on like Hailey. She can defeat the Chaos Bots normally like any other person would, but whenever I see her do it, she's just trying to focus on the situation at hand while also not thinking about herself, because I'm sure that a normal person would think about themselves a little more if they're doing a list that prevents a bad future. And let's be real, even if the obstacles that Hailey goes through is still complicated for those people, seeing Hailey go through it is a lot more difficult for her than them. So all I can say is that if she can go through an obstacle that can be a lot more difficult against her, since that she is really not capable of doing anything that we've seen in the flashbacks, it gives her her own identity as a character, which does kind of show onto why some fans view her as the fourth Disney Channel goer when it comes to cartoons, alongside Anne, Luce, and Molly. Even if people may say that Star from Star vs. the Forces of Evil and Mabel from Gravity Falls may consider Disney Channel goers, for me personally, if they're being paired with a male character, which in this show's case it may qualify since that Scott is one of the main characters in this show, honestly, if they give the female character something to gravitate towards when it comes to where they come from, honestly, I can easily see the pairing of Anne, Luce, Molly, and Hailey understandably. Especially since that these shows aired years after shows like Gravity Falls and Star vs. the Forces of Evil ended. And yes, Amphibia came to an end months after Star vs. the Forces of Evil ended. So, honestly, this is mostly a different era in my point of view in comparison to what other people think about eras of Disney Channel cartoons. If I'm going to be honest, rewatching this episode just gave me a little bit more appreciation of this show rather than just seeing onto why it got cancelled nearly 2 years ago. Even though that now I'm not really into cartoons while binge watching them like I did in the past, I can still see some positivity in them, and this episode is a definition of what a show like Hailey's On It can do when it comes to forming their own identity in the same veins as Hailey's identity. Sometimes when you think that you can't follow a show completely because of how complicated it is, just stop. Honestly, it wouldn't give this show more attention, but if you're really feeling that way and you're not invested with that type of development, then you can just stop. Honestly, I understand onto why the cancellation of this show is mostly a factor of it not getting more attention compared to previous Disney Channel cartoons, but it still has a fan base some other way if they can easily catch on the material. I'm just saying that the cancellation from Disney just doesn't really feel deserved, especially removing it from Disney Plus. I can always think that whenever someone thinks that a show is too complicated for them, I can relate to them since that there are other shows that were difficult to follow, but at the end of the day, it always makes me feel like that they just can't be able to stop at the right time. And for me, stopping at a cartoon, it's mainly the fact that it's just mostly burned out than getting too overwhelmed. Really, this episode was a good introduction, so even if you may say that it's still complicated to follow, you need to admit that there is still creativity in this pilot. So the rating I'm giving this episode is an 8 out of 10. While I do prefer other first episodes from other cartoons, you can't deny that there is still some effort to make this show have an identity, because at the end of the day, that is literally the most important goal when it comes to a first episode from a cartoon, especially furthering it in later episodes, which would have explored more if this never got cancelled. Just because I watch less cartoons than before due to passion slowly dying doesn't mean that the passion is dead. And I still see new things here and there in cartoons like Hailey's On It.
You is the start of life for me.